I'm Audrey, 35, female. I live in a city that I help shape, working as an urban planner to design communities and public spaces. My apartment overlooks a small park I helped revitalize, a quiet life I built for myself, piece by piece. For years, I believed my professional achievements, though not flashy, were respected by my family, but I was wrong. This is the story of how a party meant to humiliate me ended up exposing the rot in my family and giving me the blueprint for the perfect revenge. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The invitation had been suspiciously grand, embossed cardstock, gold lettering, for what my sister Jessica called a family milestone celebration. The milestone, apparently, was mine. A few weeks prior, the large-scale city redevelopment project I'd poured the last 3 years of my life into, the Northwood Initiative, was officially put on indefinite hold by the city council. A combination of budget cuts and political maneuvering had killed it. I was devastated. It wasn't just a job, it was my vision for a greener, more equitable part of the city. I'd called Jessica in tears, looking for a sister's comfort. She'd made all the right sympathetic noises. "Oh, sweetie, that's awful. Don't worry, we'll cheer you up. We should have a party to get your mind off it." Now, standing in her perfectly manicured backyard, I understood. This wasn't a party to cheer me up. This was a victory lap for her. My entire extended family was here. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all mingling around a catered buffet and an open bar. Jessica, ever the marketing director, knew how to stage an event. She and her husband, Tom, a slick real estate developer who always looked at my city planning work with thinly veiled contempt, held court near the French doors. He'd once called my job drawing pretty pictures for committees who don't have any real money. My Aunt Carol gave me a tight, knowing hug at the entrance. "Chin up, dear," she whispered, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd. "Remember who you are, even if they've forgotten." She was the only one who had ever truly understood my passion for building communities over just building properties. She saw the art and the humanity in it, while the rest, led by Jessica, only saw the lack of a high-flying corporate title and a fat bonus. I tried to blend in, grabbing a glass of sparkling water and making small talk with a cousin about his new boat. But the air was thick with a strange energy, a mix of pity and smugness. People would ask, "How are you holding up, Audrey?" with a look that said they were enjoying the drama. The centerpiece of the party, however, was something I didn't notice until Jessica tapped a wine glass for an announcement. Above the buffet, strung between two ornate pillars, was a massive, professionally printed banner. I had to squint to read the looping, cheerful font. It said, "Congratulations on your big free time, Audrey, formerly a loser of projects." For a second, I thought I was misreading it. But no, the word loser was there, cheekily put in quotes as if that softened the blow. It was a direct, juvenile, and stunningly cruel jab. The "formerly a loser of projects" was clearly a play on words, a joke about losing the project, but the intent was unmistakable. They had turned my professional heartbreak into a punchline. A wave of stunned silence fell over the party before a few nervous titters broke out. My sister's friends, mostly. I looked at Jessica, whose face was a mask of saccharine sympathy. "Just a little joke to lighten the mood," she announced brightly. "We all fail sometimes. The important thing is to laugh at it." Her husband Tom smirked, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "That's my girl, always finding the silver lining." I felt my blood run cold, then hot with a rage so pure it was almost calming. I looked at the banner, at their smiling faces, at the expectant eyes of my family, and I did something they never anticipated. I threw my head back and laughed, a real, loud, genuine laugh. The shock on their faces was priceless. They wanted tears, they wanted a scene. I gave them amusement. As I laughed, I caught my Aunt Carol's eye. She was not laughing. She was looking at Tom, her gaze narrowed with a sudden, intense focus. Her expression wasn't one of anger, but of calculation, as if she'd just seen a puzzle piece click into place. My laughter died down, and I gave Jessica a brilliant smile. "Wow, Jess, you really went all out. Thank you for the perspective." Then I walked away, my mind already working, already laying the groundwork for something new. The Northwood Initiative might be dead, but my career wasn't, and their little celebration was far from over. My laughter had unsettled them, but the party machine churned on. People began to talk and eat again, though they cast furtive glances my way, as if I might explode. I needed a moment, so I slipped inside the house, heading for the quiet study. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard voices from within Jessica and Tom. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I can't believe she just laughed. Jessica was saying, her voice tight with frustration. It was supposed to be a gentle ribbing, to show her she can't take her little city projects so seriously. She's always so sanctimonious about her community work. Forget her, babe. Tom's voice was a low rumble. The banner was brilliant, served its purpose. What purpose? Jessica asked, to make her cry. She didn't even flinch. There was a pause. No, Tom said, his tone shifting. It became colder, more strategic. The purpose was to make sure everyone here, especially your father, sees her as a failure. With her big project dead, she's got no credibility left. It makes our own plans look that much more solid. It's about optics. Control the family narrative. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a mean-spirited joke. It was a calculated move. My father, who was getting older, held significant sway in family investments and had always been quietly proud of my stable, if not glamorous, career path. Tom and Jessica were clearly positioning themselves to be the family's power couple, the ones to be trusted with future ventures, while I was relegated to the role of the idealistic fool. I pushed the door open. They both jumped, startled. Jessica's face paled. Tom, however, recovered instantly, his smug expression settling back into place. "Audrey," he said smoothly, "just talking about how proud we are of you for being such a good sport about everything." I heard. I said, my voice flat. "You were talking about optics, about controlling the narrative." Jessica rushed forward. "Audrey, you misunderstood. Tom was just saying." I understood perfectly. I cut her off. I looked past her, directly at Tom. "You think my project failing makes me irrelevant? You think this little stunt makes you look strong?" Tom shrugged, a dismissive gesture that set my teeth on edge. "It's just business, Audrey. In my world, when a project dies, you move on. You don't get a trophy for trying. I'm trying to close a major acquisition for a new development, the Apex Towers. It's a huge deal, billions. We need investors, including family ones, to see we're backing winners. Nothing personal." Everything suddenly felt sharp and clear. Apex Towers, I'd heard whispers about it. A massive luxury high-rise project that had been lobbying the city hard for zoning variances. They were buying up land aggressively. And it was nothing personal. For him, my career's biggest setback was just a convenient piece of leverage to make him look better to potential investors in our own family. The cruelty of the banner wasn't the point. It was a tool. I stared at him at the casual way he dismissed my life's work as a stepping stone for his own ambition. The banner wasn't just a lie about me. It was a carefully constructed piece of marketing for them. They weren't just mocking my failure. They were celebrating it as a necessary component of their success. "You're right, Tom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It's not personal, it's business." I turned and walked out of the study, leaving them in a stunned silence. The laughter from the garden sounded distant and hollow. I found Aunt Carol by the rose bushes, holding a small plate of untouched appetizers. She looked at me, her expression grim. "I saw Tom on the phone earlier," she said, her voice low. "He was talking to someone from Sterling Group. Mentioned the Northwood land. Said it was prime for a quick rezoning now that the city's pet project was out of the way. Sterling Group was Tom's development company. The Northwood land was the very land my project was supposed to protect and revitalize for public use. It all clicked into place. This wasn't just about making me look bad. My project hadn't just failed. It had been killed, and I had a sickening feeling that the man celebrating my failure in the backyard was the one who had quietly orchestrated its demise. The banner wasn't just a lie, it was a tombstone. The rest of the party passed in a blur. I smiled, I nodded, I accepted condolences from relatives who now seemed like actors in a play I hadn't known I was in. My mind, however, was miles away, in the cold, sterile world of city planning documents, zoning applications, and council meeting minutes. Aunt Carol's words echoed in my head, prime for a quick rezoning. Those words were developer, speak for a hostile takeover of public interest land. Tom wasn't just an opportunist feasting on the scraps of my failed project. He was a predator who had likely hunted it down. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found Aunt Carol again, this time sitting alone on a stone bench at the far end of the garden, away from the lingering music and chatter. The faint scent of jasmine hung in the evening air. She patted the space beside her, and I sat down, the exhaustion of the day finally settling into my bones. "He's arrogant," she said without preamble, staring at the perfectly trimmed hedges. Jessica is cruel, but she's mostly driven by insecurity. Tom is driven by pure greed, and arrogant men make mistakes. You think he was involved in killing the Northwood Initiative? I asked, the question tasting like poison. I think it's a remarkable coincidence, she replied dryly. Your publicly funded, community-focused project, which tied up 5 square blocks of valuable real estate, gets inexplicably defunded. Weeks later, the head of a major private development firm, who happens to be married to your sister, is on the phone talking about rezoning that exact parcel of land. It's a little too neat. I thought back over the last few months, the sudden, inexplicable opposition from Councilman Miller, who had previously been a vocal supporter of the project. The anonymous op-eds that began appearing in local business journals criticizing the initiative's budget and timeline, using technical jargon that suggested an insider source. At the time, I'd dismissed it as the usual political friction that comes with any large public works project. Now it felt like a coordinated attack. Councilman Miller, I said aloud, he was the swing vote that tabled the project. He flipped at the last minute. He cited unforeseen fiscal constraints and concerns from the business community. In which businesses does Tom's company, Sterling Group, work with most closely? Aunt Carol prompted gently. My mind raced. Sterling Group's primary construction partner was a massive firm called Titan Construction. Their primary lender was Westfield Bank. Both of their CEO had been major donors to Councilman Miller's last campaign. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a trail of breadcrumbs, leading from Tom's ambition directly to my project's grave. His Apex Towers project, I murmured, the pieces snapping together with sickening speed. It's supposed to be downtown. Why would he care about the Northwood District? Diversification, Aunt Carol said, her librarian's mind systematically cataloging the facts. Apex is his shiny, high-profile venture, but the real money in development is often in acquiring undervalued land and flipping it after a favorable rezoning. Northwood, without your initiative, is just a tract of low-value industrial land, but if it's rezoned for high-density residential use, its value would increase tenfold, maybe more. He could use that land as leverage for bigger loans for his other projects, or sell it off in a year for a massive profit. We sat in silence for a moment, the cheerful party sounds from the house a world away. Jessica's petty jealousy had been the cover. She'd provided the emotional smokescreen, the family drama, the banner that made it all seem like a personal squabble. But underneath it was Tom's cold, calculated business strategy. He hadn't just let my project die, he'd actively sabotaged it, using political connections bought and paid for. He had dismantled my dream brick by brick, all so he could pave it over and sell it to the highest bidder. They didn't just mock me. I said, a cold, hard anger solidifying in my chest. They used me. They used our family. Yes, they did. Aunt Carol said, finally turning to look at me, her eyes clear and resolute in the twilight. So the question is, Audrey, what does an urban planner do when she discovers the foundations of a structure are completely rotten? I met her gaze, the answer already forming in my mind. She condemns it, I said. And then she builds something better in its place. The next Monday, I didn't go to my office. My mandatory leave after the project's suspension felt less like a punishment and more like an opportunity. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm, became a war room. I converted my dining table into a command center, spreading out city maps, zoning codes, and printouts of council meeting minutes. My expertise was in understanding the complex web of regulations, permits, and political influences that govern a city's growth. Tom had used that system against me. Now, I would use my intimate knowledge of it to unravel his entire operation. My first step was to file a series of Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests. I didn't target Tom or Sterling Group directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, I requested all communications between Councilman Miller's office and a list of 24 LLC. Developers like Tom often use anonymous shell companies to purchase land and lobby politicians to avoid public scrutiny. It's a tedious process, but I knew the patterns. I spent 2 days cross-referencing property records with the LLC I suspected were linked to Sterling Group. Sure enough, I found 3 separate shell companies that had, over the last 6 months, bought up small, seemingly insignificant commercial properties bordering the Northwood District. On their own, they were nothing. Together, they formed a strategic perimeter. While waiting for the FOIA results, I focused on Tom's flagship project, Apex Towers. He'd boasted about it at the party. It was his pride and joy, the monument to his success. I knew from my work that a project of that scale required dozens of permits, environmental impact reports, traffic flow analyses, public utility assessments. It was a mountain of paperwork, and every single page had to be perfect. Any discrepancy, any overlooked regulation, could bring the entire project to a grinding halt. I started with the environmental impact report. It was a dense, 1,000-page document, but I knew what to look for. Tucked away in an appendix was a geological survey citing stable bedrock suitable for deep foundation construction. It was signed off by a small, obscure engineering firm I'd never heard of, Geosource Analytics. Something about it felt off. Major developers typically use one of the big, reputable engineering firms for something as critical as a geological survey. Using a no-name company was a red flag. I spent the next few days digging into Geosource Analytics. Their digital footprint was almost non-existent, a basic website, a business registration filed 18 months ago, and a single listed officer, a man named Peter Finch. A few more hours of searching public records databases gave me what I was looking for. Peter Finch was Tom's brother-in-law, the husband of his sister. It was a clear conflict of interest, but more importantly, it was a weak link. A firm set up for the sole purpose of rubber stamping a report is bound to have cut corners. The final piece of the puzzle arrived on Friday, the FOIA results. It was a deluge of emails. I spent the entire weekend reading, fueled by coffee and a burning sense of purpose, and then I found it. An email from a senior aide in Councilman Miller's office to an anonymous email address. The aide was confirming a meeting to discuss zoning flexibility for the Northwood periphery. The metadata on the email was the key. While the sender and recipient were masked, the email had passed through a private server. With a little technical help from a friend in my city's IT department, who owed me a favor, we traced the server's IP address. It was registered to the headquarters of Sterling Group. I leaned back in my chair, the evidence laid out before me like one of my urban planning blueprints. It was a clear picture of corruption. Tom, through his shell companies and his puppet engineering firm, was building his empire on a foundation of lies. He had used his political leverage with Councilman Miller to kill my public project, freeing up the Northwood land. He had created a fake geological report for Apex Towers to fast-track its approval. He was playing the city and my family for fools. Aunt Carol came over that Sunday evening with a pot of soup. She looked at the chaotic mess of papers covering my apartment and smiled. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked. I held up 2 documents, the fraudulent geological survey for Apex Towers and the printout of the email trace. "I found the rotten foundations," I said. "Now I just need to schedule the demolition." My revenge couldn't be a quiet email or a private confrontation. Tom and Jessica had humiliated me publicly, so their downfall had to be public as well. They had used a party as their stage. I would use the formal, unassailable theater of a city planning commission meeting. Tom's power came from the perception of his invincibility, his mastery of the system. I was going to use the system to show everyone he was just a common cheat. My plan had 2 phases. Phase 1 was to target Apex Towers. Phase 2 was to detonate everything at once in the most public way possible. I began by drafting an anonymous letter, not to the press, but to the State Department of Environmental Protection and the city's Department of Buildings. In precise, technical language, I laid out the clear conflict of interest regarding the geological survey for Apex Towers. I pointed to the public records linking Geosource Analytics to Tom's family and questioned the validity of a survey from a firm with no prior project history. I didn't make accusations. I simply asked questions and cited the relevant codes and regulations that demanded impartiality. I knew that an official inquiry, even a preliminary one, would force the city to place a temporary work order on the Apex site pending a review. It would be the first crack in Tom's perfect facade. I sent the letters from a public post office using a printed label, no traces. Phase 2 was more intricate. The City Planning Commission had a public meeting scheduled in 2 weeks. On the agenda was a preliminary hearing for a set of minor zoning variances for a downtown property. It was usually a dull affair, attended only by a few lobbyists and City Hall regulars. But the rules of these meetings allow for a public comment period on any matter related to city planning. This was my stage. I spent the next week preparing what I called my rezoning proposal. It wasn't an official document, but a meticulously crafted presentation. I created slides, charts, and maps, just as I would for any professional project. The presentation was titled, A Case Study in Urban Development Ethics, the Northwood District and the Apex Towers Project. My first set of slides detailed the history and public benefit of my Northwood initiative, showing the community support and the projected positive impact. The next slide showed the timeline of its abrupt defunding, perfectly aligned with the dates of Councilman Miller's sudden opposition. Then I overlaid a map showing the shell companies owned by Sterling Group and their strategic acquisition of land around Northwood. I included the email from Miller's office with the server IP address traced back to Sterling Group, illustrating a clear channel of backroom dealing. The second half of my presentation focused on Apex Towers. I showcased its reliance on the fraudulent geological report. I demonstrated how Tom was leveraging the potential future value of the improperly acquired Northwood land to secure financing for his downtown project. In essence, I was showing that his entire enterprise was a house of cards built on the ashes of a project meant for the public good. The final touch was personal. I needed my family there. A week before the meeting, I sent a carefully worded email to my entire extended family, including my parents Jessica and Tom. Dear family, it began. As many of you know, my Northwood initiative was recently shelved. After doing some soul searching, I've realized that my vision might have been too small. I've been working on a new, much more ambitious proposal for the city, one that incorporates private and public interests. I have been given the opportunity to present my preliminary findings at the next City Planning Commission meeting. It would mean the world to me to have my family's support in the audience as I embark on this new chapter. It's a chance for a fresh start. I knew Jessica and Tom wouldn't be able to resist. The chance to see me potentially fail again, this time in a formal public setting, it was irresistible catnip for their egos. They would come expecting to see me stumble, to present some half-baked, idealistic nonsense. They would bring the family to witness my second humiliation. They thought they were coming to a comedy. They had no idea they were the punchline. The day of the Planning Commission meeting, a stop. Work order was officially posted at the Apex Towers construction site. A small article appeared on a local news blog noting that the project was under review due to procedural irregularities. The first crack had appeared. Tom must have been scrambling, but my invitation to the family was his blind spot. His arrogance wouldn't let him imagine that I, the loser, could be a threat. I arrived at the City Hall annex 30 minutes early. The room was small and formal, with a raised dais for the 5 commission members and rows of chairs for the public. As I set up my laptop, my family started to file in. My parents looked nervous but supportive. My cousins looked bored, and then Jessica and Tom arrived. They were radiating smug confidence. Jessica gave me a patronizing little wave. Tom was on his phone, looking annoyed, probably dealing with the Apex fallout, but he shot me a dismissive smirk. They took seats in the front row, a place of honor to witness my downfall. The last person to arrive was Aunt Carol, who gave me a firm, steady nod from the back of the room. The meeting began, droning on with bureaucratic formalities. Finally, the commission chair announced the public comment period. First on the list, he said, peering at his paper, is Audrey Miller, on the topic of urban development ethics. I saw a flicker of confusion on Tom's face. That wasn't the title I had used in my invitation. I walked to the podium, my heart hammering but my hands steady. I looked out at the audience, my eyes lingering for a moment on Jessica and Tom. Their smiles were starting to look a little strained. Good afternoon, members of the commission. I began, my voice clear and strong. My name is Audrey Miller. For the past 3 years, I was the lead planner for the Northwood Initiative, a project designed to serve the public good. This presentation is a case study on how such projects can be deliberately undermined for private profit. The first slide appeared on the screen behind me, a bright, hopeful rendering of the completed Northwood project. I then clicked to the next slide, showing the timeline of its defunding. I could feel the mood in the room shift. This was not the presentation anyone was expecting. I moved methodically through my evidence. I explained the backroom lobbying, projecting the incriminating email from Councilman Miller's office onto the screen. I heard a sharp intake of breath from my mother. I showed the map of Tom's shell companies, their logos subtly watermarked with the Sterling Group emblem, encircling the Northwood district like vultures. Then I pivoted to Apex Towers. A developer's ambition is not a crime, I said, looking directly at Tom, whose face had gone from tan to a pasty white. But building that ambition on a foundation of deceit is, the geological survey for the Apex Towers project, a critical safety document, was signed by a firm, Geosource Analytics, owned by the developer's own brother-in-law. A murmur went through the room. One of the commissioners started scribbling notes furiously. Jessica was staring at me, her mouth slightly agape, the color draining from her face. This developer, I continued, my voice ringing with authority, used his political influence to kill a public project, secretly acquired the surrounding land, and submitted fraudulent documents to fast-track his own. This isn't just unethical. It's a flagrant abuse of the system you are sworn to uphold. I didn't need to say Tom's name. Every eye in the room, my family's, the commissioners, the 2 local reporters who had smelled a story and were now furiously typing, was locked on him. He looked trapped, his smugness completely stripped away, replaced by a raw, impotent fury. Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. I ended my presentation with a final slide. It was a picture of the banner from the party. Congratulations on your big free time, Audrey. It read, Some people celebrate failure. I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. They believe that if you tear someone else down, it makes you taller, but our city, our community, should not be built on such a rotten foundation. I cede the rest of my time. I walked back to my seat in absolute silence. The commission chair, looking stunned, cleared his throat. Thank you, M.S. Miller. The commission will be taking your presentation and its serious allegations under immediate review. As the meeting was adjourned, my family sat frozen. Tom shot up from his seat and stormed out of the room, followed by a frantic Jessica. My father looked at me, his expression a complex mixture of shock, horror, and a dawning, terrible understanding. My mother was openly crying, but as I packed up my laptop, I felt a profound sense of calm. The building was condemned, the demolition was complete, the aftermath was swift and brutal. My presentation at the Planning Commission meeting was like a controlled detonation that sent shockwaves through the city. The 2 reporters in the room had their stories on the front page of the city's biggest newspaper the next morning. Planning Commission bombshell, local developer accused of fraud and corruption, screamed the headline. The article detailed my allegations, the evidence I presented, and the immediate launch of a formal investigation by the city attorney's office into Sterling Group and Councilman Miller. Tom's world collapsed. The investigation froze all his assets and put an indefinite hold on all his projects, not just Apex Towers. His lenders and investors, spooked by the scandal, pulled their funding. The fraudulent geological survey was confirmed, and his brother-in-law's firm Geosource Analytics was exposed as a complete sham. Within a month, Sterling Group filed for bankruptcy. Councilman Miller resigned in disgrace before he could be formally impeached. The family fallout was just as devastating. My parents were horrified. My father, a man who valued integrity above all else, was deeply ashamed. He confronted Tom and Jessica in a family meeting that I chose not to attend. Aunt Carol told me later it was a quiet, sorrowful affair. There was no yelling, only my father expressing his profound disappointment. He told them that their greed had tarnished the family's name and that he was cutting all personal and financial ties. Tom, facing potential criminal charges, had no fight left in him. Jessica, stripped of her husband's wealth and status, was a shell of her former self. The power couple was finished. They sold their house to cover legal fees and moved to a small rental apartment across the state. I haven't spoken to either of them since. For me, life changed in ways I hadn't expected. The city, embarrassed by the scandal, was eager to make amends. A new, reform-minded council was elected, and one of their first acts was to resurrect the Northwood Initiative. They didn't just reinstate it. They offered me the position of director for the newly formed City Redevelopment Authority, with full autonomy and an even larger budget. They wanted me to lead the charge, to be the public face of the city's new commitment to ethical development. I accepted. The work was more challenging and more rewarding than I could have ever imagined. We broke ground on the Northwood Initiative 6 months ago. The site, once a symbol of my greatest failure, is now a hub of activity and hope. We're building parks, affordable housing, and community centers, exactly as I had always envisioned. Sometimes, from the window of my new office in City Hall, I look out at the skyline. I can see the skeletal frame of what would have been Apex Towers, a half-finished monument to greed that will likely be torn down. I don't feel triumph when I see it, nor do I feel hatred for Jessica and Tom anymore. I mostly feel a quiet sense of peace. They built their lives on a foundation of lies, and it crumbled, as all such structures eventually do. I built my life and now my career on creating solid, sustainable, and honest foundations. The banner at that party was meant to define me as a loser, but in the end, it was just a piece of paper. The real, lasting structures are the ones you build with integrity, brick by patient brick. My name is on the cornerstone of the new Northwood Library. My family, the ones who stood by me, come to visit the new park on weekends. The skyline of my life has been redrawn, and it's a view I am truly proud of. The celebration of my failure turned out to be the groundbreaking for my greatest success.